When I first started at OOIDA, I started in our permits and licensing department. And within like the first couple of days, I was sitting with an agent. We were taking calls. This guy calls in and he says, I just bought a truck. Now what do I do? That is no business planning. So don't be that guy. My name is Andrew King. I work for the OOIDA Foundation. How many of you are familiar with OOIDA? Raise your hand. Okay, I see quite a few hands up, but there's also quite a few hands down. So just a brief intro into who we are and what we do. OOIDA fights for the rights of all truckers. We have 150,000 members nationwide and even some in Canada. And we have an advocacy group in DC that helps fight for your rights on the Hill. But we also provide a number of services, things like insurance, permits, and licensing. We even have a fuel card. And we also offer lots of discounts and whatnot for those who are part of the association. So if you're not too familiar or you're interested in learning more, our booth is 11128. It's just follow this wall back here and look up and you'll see our sign and go there and you can learn more. But before we get into what we're going to talk about today, just a little background on who I am. Again, my name's Andrew. I've worked at OOIDA for 13 years. 12 of that has been in the foundation. So we fight for the rights of all truckers through research and education. And that's what we're going to talk about today, is creating a business plan. And I imagine a lot of people, when they hear business plan, they start thinking of like something like a portfolio. You think you have to have a lot of charts or a lot of writing, and that can seem kind of intimidating. But that is not what this is about. It's going to be simple and straightforward, and we'll walk you through the process. So I wanted to start to talk about why this is so important. And if anyone was involved in some of the meetings yesterday, like the Truck Leasing Task Force, you heard a lot of people talk about how drivers are really interested in becoming owner-operators. They want to get their own truck. They want to go out on their own. But yet they don't really understand all the things that are involved and the dangers that are with that. So I want to start by telling you two stories, and that comes from two different charts. So this data I'm about to show you comes from the Bureau of Labor Statistics for the transportation and warehouse sector. That includes more than just trucking, but it gives us a really good snapshot of the failure rate for those who enter into the trucking business. So you'll see these numbers pop up here. By the first year, all trucking companies that get their own authority will fail. 20% will fail by their first year. By the second year, that number goes to 31%, and then by the fifth year, over 50% will fail. So if you imagine everyone here in this little area, if you are all new motor carriers going to enter into the industry, statistics will tell us that over half of you will fail before you reach your fifth year. And I would actually honestly say that these numbers are conservative. They're probably even higher than this. And so that is a huge problem. We obviously don't want to see anyone fail. This is a huge investment, and it can have devastating effects on all parts of your life. The second chart I want to show you is the same data, but what I've done is I've taken certain years. So this is the survival rate for establishments by birth year. And you'll see at the top, there's 1995, 2000. So what I'm doing is I'm taking all of the trucking businesses, basically, that started in 1995, and you can see their survival rate. And the same for 2000, 2005, and so on. And what you're going to notice in this chart, which I find very fascinating, is the slope is almost identical. So it doesn't matter what's going on in the freight market. I know right now we've been in a trucking recession since maybe Q2 of 2022. But this shows me that it doesn't really matter what's happening in the freight market. Even in years where things are going really well, people are still failing. And that is a significant problem and a significant issue. So why are they failing? And so we're going to talk about that. There are three main pitfalls when people start their own business, especially in trucking. Number one is a lack of sufficient capital. So obviously to become an owner-operator, you got to buy a truck. Maybe you're buying a trailer. If you're getting your own authority, you have to pay for insurance. You have fuel. You have all these different expenses, and that requires a lot of capital. I mean, if you have even just one breakdown, that could be enough to end you. So one thing that we recommend at OOIDA, and understand that it might be difficult for some, but that you don't even try to enter into the industry or become an owner-operator if you don't have at least 6 months of capital on hand. Because if you break down or you have an issue or you have some act of God where you get into a crash and it's not your fault, but it just takes one little incident and you're not able to earn any money, and that'll put you under. Number 2 is inadequate management. So a lot of people who call into the association or who are members, and we do represent company drivers as well, they're really good at driving a truck, but that doesn't necessarily translate over to owning their own business. You know, there's a lot more responsibilities. You have the taxes, quarterly filings, you have all this report and paperwork keeping that you have to do, and not everyone is able to do that. And then the third issue is poor business planning. And so I love to tell this story every time I give this talk. When I first started at OOIDA, I started in our permits and licensing department. And within like the first couple of days, I was sitting with an agent. We were taking calls. This guy calls in and he says, I just bought a truck. Now what do I do? That is no business planning. So don't be that guy. Have an actual plan. Because if that is what you're doing to go into it, you're probably going to fail, unfortunately. So we're going to talk about the different elements of what is a business plan. So a business plan is simply just a written document. It's just going to be a way for you to write down what your goals actually are and how to achieve them. And this is something that you can regularly look at to see where you are in the process, if you're being successful or you're not. And this generally includes 7 different segments. Now, it might include more than that. Depends on what thing you're looking at. And we're going to talk about each one of these 7 in order. And we're going to spend the bulk of our time talking about cost of operations, but we'll spend a little time on each. So the first one we're going to talk about is an executive summary. So obviously this is probably the most self-explanatory thing that we're going to talk about, but basically you want this to be just one page, even just a couple paragraphs of what service you're providing as a carrier. There are probably active carriers. There are over 300,000 active carriers in the United States. You're competing against them. There's got to be something that makes you stand out above others, that someone's going to want to come to you to get freight. And so you need to be able to explain what exactly are you going to provide. Are you going to try and just shoot for the moon and do everything? Because I find if you do that, you tend to fail. Or you can find that niche where you are really an expert that you can succeed and make a good living. Who are your customers going to be? We often get people who call into OOIDA and they say, you know, I have a truck, I have my own authority. How do I find freight? Can you book loads for me? And that's not what OOIDA does. And again, if that's your business plan, you're probably not going to succeed. And then the last thing is, what is the future of your company? What do you want it to become? So the second part is company description. And just back up just one second. I would recommend, if you're going to create a business plan, that the executive summary is the last thing that you do. It's much easier to summarize what you've already done rather than try to create something and then follow through with it later on. Because as you do your research, you might understand or come to a realization that maybe your goals are changing. So you need to explain your company. Where are you going to run? What are you going to haul? Are you going to haul in all 48 states? A lot of people who get their own authority, they'll say, I'm going to haul in all 48 states. When chances are that's very unlikely, and it's probably foolish to do so, because that's going to add to your costs. You have certain permits and licenses that you need for certain states, and on top of that, your insurance is going to be a whole lot more expensive if you're running in certain states rather than others. So where are you actually going to run? And what do you really want to do? And what is your mission statement? What would describe your company in a single sentence? You know, I started off by saying OOIDA fights for the rights of all truckers. And that one sentence, you know exactly what we do. And that really summarizes everything. What would be a mission statement for your business that would summarize what you do as a carrier? And then operational structure. So one thing we do, and I should say that what I'm presenting here is just one small piece of a program that we call Truck to Success. It's a 3-day seminar where we take you from being a company driver to being an owner-operator leased on to an owner-operator under your own authority. And we walk you through all the steps that you need to take in order to do that. And one of the things that we talk about And we have a man he's here actually from Taxation Solutions. Talk about setting up your business entity. How are you going to incorporate? Are you going to be a sole proprietor? What would work best for your business and the state that you are forming your business in? How do you keep yourself from paying the most taxes? How do you keep most of your money? So some of this operational structure really depends on that. And then lastly, what are your financial goals? And so the very first year that we did Truck to Success, we had this guy come in on the first day and he says, I want to be a fleet owner. He was so excited, that was his dream. I want to own multiple trucks. By day number 2, he comes back and he says, well, I don't think I want to be a fleet owner anymore, but I want to be an owner-operator under my own authority. By day number 3, he said, well, I don't want to be on my own. I'll just stay being leased on. And to me, I would consider that a success because he realized that his initial goal was not realistic for him because it was going to require more than he was able to do. And so when you take these courses, when you go through Truck to Success, that is our ultimate goal, is to give you the tools to succeed, but also to be realistic on what you actually can succeed at, because we don't want you to fail. That's the last thing that we want to happen. So on the third part is the market analysis. And this is somewhat easy to do. It should be anyway. If you're going to go to some kind of bank that has nothing to do with trucking, they might not understand what trucking actually is about and its necessity. And so having a little information on what our industry is and how important it is, and literally that can be like a paragraph. And the second part is the state of the market. And this is something that OOIDA Foundation puts out on a regular basis. We have a monthly market update where we go through all the different facets of trucking, van, reefer, flatbed, trucking overall, freight overall, and you can look and see where the industry is. There are a number of news outlets today that are always saying that the next upcycle is just around the corner. That's not true, and don't believe them. And I know that we want to believe that because we want it to be changing. We want that next upcycle to come. But having a real understanding of what's going on in the freight market is important, and that's something that we provide. And that can be very beneficial on whether you want to make that next step or not, or when you want to make that next step, when you want to expand your business. And then the last part of this is called a SWOT analysis. Anyone ever heard of that before? I see a few. So it's an acronym. It stands for strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. And basically all you're doing is just taking a bullet point list of each one. So strengths and weaknesses, those are on the top. That is internal things, internal. So what are your personal strengths? Are you good at driving a truck? Have a lot of experience on the road? But then also, what are your weaknesses? Well, maybe I've driven a truck, but I've never been a business owner before. You want to list these things out and be realistic on what is actually going on within your company. And then the opportunities and threats, the two on the bottom, those are external factors. So what you're wanting to do is try to seize on opportunities and minimize those threats because of your strengths and weaknesses. So being able to see them listed out like this, and these are just some examples. And if you are interested, you can always contact OOIDA, and we actually have a sample business plan that you literally can take and just change a few things here and there, and it just kind of walks you through the process as well. And then number 4, I feel like this is one that probably most people don't realize is important, and that's market strategy. So how are you going to obtain freight? Are you just relying on load boards? Are you only using brokers? Because the chances are, if you're only using brokers, you're going to go broke at some point. So we strongly encourage that you reach out and try to find direct contact with shippers, small manufacturers. You want to build those kind of relationships so when the freight market is going down, you have some protection because you're not living solely off of the spot market. And then growth strategy, if you have one, what do you want your business to become and how are you going to obtain other customers? And then the last one is, how are you going to market yourself? There are hundreds of thousands of other carriers. What's going to make you stand out above others? Even just the way that you name your company. I remember working in permits and licensing, you have people call in and they get their own authority and they have this name for their company and it sounds maybe cool to them. Maybe it's kind of funny, but it really sounds stupid. And when you're trying to be professional and you're looking at, someone is looking at who do I want to haul my freight, and if you have a dumb name, I'm probably not going to pick you. Other thing is when you're coming to the docks, are you professional? Are you saying yes sir, yes ma'am? Do you dress in a professional way? Are you clean and neat as much as you can be? Are you on time? These are all different ways to market yourself so that when someone is looking for a carrier, you stand out above others in their mind. So that's just something to consider that I feel like a lot of people don't even think about. And then this is the one we're going to spend the most time on, and this is cost of operations. And this is a quote that actually comes from our executive vice president, who's Louis Pugh, standing in the back. And he might have taken this from somebody else. But this is not a money-made business. It's a money-saved business. I have talked to lots and lots of truckers who will come up and they say, I gross $200,000 a year, or something like that. And I'm thinking, okay, that's what you gross. What's your net? What are your costs? It doesn't matter how much money you make. How much are you saving at the end of the day? How much are you actually profiting? And just for an example, we have these two carriers here, the green and the blue, and they're running the exact same route. I just plugged in some just random numbers here. Say they're running the same route and it's paying $2 a mile. The blue carrier knows his cost of operations, he tracks it regularly, and so he is running as efficiently as possible. And he knows his cost of operation it takes him $1.50 per mile to operate his truck. The green carrier has no idea what he's doing. He's just going up and down the road. He's not efficient whatsoever, and it costs him $2.25 to run that truck, and he has no idea what it's costing him. Well, obviously one's making a profit, and one is basically subsidizing someone else's freight. One of the first years that we did Truck to Success, we have a calculator that you can get online, and you can plug in your numbers, and it'll formulate everything for you. And we had this couple who plugged in all the numbers, and then the next morning they came and they said, hey, I want you to look at this spreadsheet. Is it working correctly? Because all their numbers were in the red. And I looked it over and I said, yeah, it's working correctly. And their eyes just got really big. They had no idea that they were actually losing money every time they were hauling freight because they were not tracking their cost of operations. They had no understanding of what they needed to make per mile in order to make it. So just a few items that we're going to discuss. Fixed versus variable costs. Some of these might be kind of rudimentary to some, but others might not know them, so I'm going to just explain a little bit. So fixed is obviously something that no matter if your truck is running or not, you still have to pay. So your truck payment, your insurance, things like that are fixed costs. Those are much harder to reduce. So when we talk about controlling costs, we're mainly talking about variable costs. And those are things like fuel and permits and licensing, things like that, that you have more control over based on how you're operating your truck. We're going to do a little example about net profit margin, something that you can do even on any load to see whether it's actually worth your time or not. And then the last one is we're going to talk about 3 different ratios that you can use in your business plan to see if you are healthy as a carrier or not, or if you're maybe in that danger zone where you might need to change some few things so you don't go under. So this is the net profit margin. I'm just going to do this example that you can do. And again, that spreadsheet that I mentioned before actually will do this for you. If you plug in your numbers you could do it yearly, monthly, weekly, however you want to do it, it will create this end product and it will plug it into other tables. And I normally, when I do this presentation, I do an actual demo of the spreadsheet, but I can't do that right now. But if you have any questions, you can talk to me and I can help you work through it. But say, for example, a carrier is looking at running a load, and this load is 500 miles, and it's paying $1.50 per mile. I know that that's really low. This is just for an example, okay? And you know that your cost of operations, you've done all of your tracking. And actually, the figures I'm showing come from our surveys, and these are actual numbers for cost of operations for owner-operators. So say you know your variable costs are 92 cents per mile, and your fixed costs are 38 cents per mile. So we're just going to do some simple math. We're going to multiply the miles that you're running by your variable costs and your fixed costs, and you can see how much that is, and then add it together. So this is the total cost that I'm going to do to make this run. And then I'm going to multiply the 500 miles by the $1.50 to see what my gross is. And then obviously I'm going to subtract the 2, and realize that I'm making less than $100 at the end of the day on this load. That's probably not going to cut it. And just one more simple calculation you can do is you divide the net profit by your gross revenue, and that gives me this contribution margin. It says 13%. So what that's telling me is that 13% of my gross is actually going to my net. That's really, really low. That's thin margins. And if that's what you're making on a daily basis, that could be a little dangerous. So, okay, what if we change that? Maybe we control our costs. We get that 92 down to 80, and we run the numbers again. And now we're talking a little $160, and our contribution margin is 21%. That's a little better, but it's not quite as great as we'd like it to be. Maybe we can't change our costs, but maybe we can negotiate and say, hey, that $1.50 is just too low. I cannot run for that. You have to give me more. And say they change that $1.50 to $2. And running that same scenario again, you can see now that contribution is 35% of my gross is going to my net. That's a lot better. But what if I could do both? What if I could negotiate and I could control my costs? What would that end up giving me? And now we're getting 41%. We're getting closer to 50% of our gross is going to our net. And so these are things that you can do. It's not that difficult, where you can actually plug in these numbers and see whether a load would actually be viable for you or not. Because sometimes you just see the mileage and you see the per mile and you think, oh, that's great. But when you actually do the numbers, you realize you're really not making that much in the end. And you might be going to an area where you can't get freight out of. And so being aware of this ahead of time can be very beneficial. So what I'm going to present now on the left column is the owner-operator. So this comes from our surveys of our own members and what it costs them basically to run per mile. On the right column is from basically ATA. So these are large carriers, and this is what they are running per mile. So you can see the difference. This is not including taxes or wages. It's just including these base items here. But you can see the cost of operating for an owner-operator is quite a bit higher. But in a lot of the categories, we're running very similar to large carriers. The main difference is going to be right there in your fuel costs. Now, a shameless plug, OOIDA does offer a fuel card. So even though you might be an owner-operator, you can save quite a bit through that. But the other issue is also truck insurance. As you can see, there's quite a bit of difference there. But this is basically your competition. How are you going to be able to cut your costs enough to compete with a larger carrier in this sort of sense? So I want to go over just a few ratios on determining the health of your company. And of course, at the very end, we'll field questions, so you can ask more. I'm going to try and go through it fairly quickly. So operating ratio is basically to determine or measure your efficiency. How are you able to generate revenue while also controlling your costs? And this is probably the most standard measure unit that you're going to find in trucking, as well as other businesses, is operating ratio. And this is what a lot of large carriers present. And then the second one is working capital. So how much cash do you have on hand? So that you know that if you get into a sticky situation, you have enough to keep yourself above water. And then the last is a debt ratio to show how much of your business is actually leveraged by debt compared to how much assets you have. So on the first, the operating ratio, the formula to this is very simple. You're just going to take your total operating expenses, so not your debt, but your total operating expenses. Those are things that would happen within 12 months, and your total operating revenue. And you're going to divide that and then times it by 100. So say you had a Carrier Blue here, and they know that their operating expenses, because they keep track, is $150,000, and they know that their operating revenue is $200,000. And what you'll find is they have 75% operating ratio, and that's actually fairly good for an owner-operator. When you're looking at large carriers, they'll often state that we have a 90 or 95% operating ratio because they have a very different business model than what you can do. You want it to be 75% at least or lower. If you're up in the 90% range, there's a good chance that you're going to fail. If something could happen, anything out on the road could set you back, and you won't be able to survive it. The next one is the working capital ratio, and again, it kind of goes back to my previous statement that we recommend that you have at least 6 months of revenue on hand or capital on hand. So if anything does happen, you're able to survive it. So to figure out this ratio, you're going to take your current assets, anything that you can convert into cash within 12 months. And then your current liabilities is the same thing. You're not talking about debt here. You're just talking about liabilities. And you're going to divide that, and you'll come up with your working capital ratio. So we have this green carrier. He knows his current assets are $250,000, but his current liabilities are $300,000. He divides this, and he gets this figure 0.8, and you'll notice that it's in red. So working capital ratio, anything less than 1 is really bad. That means you do not have enough. In fact, you're burning through your cash. And if you're looking to get a loan from a bank or some kind of lender, this is something that they're going to look at in your business. Do you have enough working capital on hand to survive some kind of issue that would happen? You know, they're giving you a pretty substantial loan. That's quite a bit of risk. Can you pay that risk back? And so you want to have that number above 1. And what you want to shoot for an owner-operator is between 1.2 and 2. If that number is crazy high, a lender might say, well, you're not using your working capital in a way to expand your business. And so you don't want it too much higher than 2. So you're shooting between 1.2 and 2. And then the last ratio is the debt ratio. And again, this is talking about how much your business is leveraged by debt. And so here you're going to take your total debt divided by your total assets to see, you know, especially if you have already taken out a loan on a truck, and now maybe you're interested in getting a trailer, and you need to take out another loan. This is something that a lender is going to look at to see if you are a safe risk or not, if you can pay back the debts that you owe them and maybe the previous debt as well. So this carrier knows that they have $150,000 in total debt, and then their total assets, though, are $250,000, because that truck is still worth quite a bit of money. You're going to divide that, and you'll see that they have a ratio of 60%. Again, if you get above 100, that would be bad. It means you have more debt than you have assets. And so even something like 60% in maybe another business, that might be too dangerous. But because trucking is so capital intense, this might actually be a safe bet for someone to lend you that money. But obviously, you would want this quite a bit lower than 60%. So I'm just going to summarize those financial goals. So operating ratio, you want that equal to or less than 75%. The working capital, you're going to want that between 1.2 and 2. And then the last one is the debt ratio. And you'd rather have that around 20 to 30%. 60 is still quite a bit, a little too high. The next to last thing in your business plan is funding requests. So if you're especially starting out and you don't own your own truck, this is where you would do kind of the numbers, figure out some of the math to understand what exactly you would need from some type of loan in order to get into the business. Or maybe you're already an owner-operator and you're wanting to get another truck or another trailer or what have you. So we're going to do a projected budget needs statement first. And this is just running some figures. And again, this is in our business plan that you can download for free or receive for free. You know, if you're starting out, you're looking at hopefully a used truck rather than a new truck, but it's new to you. And say you look at one and you like it, and it's $100,000 with 18% interest. By the time you pay off that truck, you're paying $141,000 just because of the interest payments. And then perhaps you want to add a trailer as well, and that interest is 30%. And now you're looking at another $76,000 before that is paid off. And maybe you need to add insurance, you need to add licensing, you want to employ yourself, hopefully, and all that you need in order to start that business. So doing these numbers ahead of time, hopefully will prevent you from some heartache and some headache of knowing whether you can even do this or not. Don't be that guy who just goes out there and buys a truck and then calls OOIDA and says, now what do I do? That's not going to work for you. And then the last thing is a profit and loss statement. So this is really simple. If you're already keeping track of your cost of operations, again, we do this. We have a spreadsheet that you can use. You just fill in your own numbers, and it puts it out for you. And if you do it in a yearly basis, you could basically divide that by 12. Obviously, there's going to be fluctuations in certain months, but this gives you a little understanding of how much you are actually grossing in a month and how much expenses that you have in that month as well. And the very last thing about creating a business plan is your supporting documents and other materials. So this is where you might put in your CDL, or if you already have insurance, things like that. You can keep in the back end of your business plan. So your business plan needs to be simple. It doesn't need to be, you don't have to write paragraph upon paragraph, anything like that. This could literally be a sentence or two for each one of these items that we've talked about. And it should be understandable, readable, and realistic. And this is something that you want to review from time to time to see how you are doing, how you are faring. Do you want to change your goal? Do you need to scale it back, or do you want to expand it? Are you even meeting it? If you're not keeping track, you'll find that you're just floating around. And you might not know if you're succeeding or you're failing. And we don't want you to fail. And so keeping a business plan like this can be super beneficial. So here is my contact information. Again, this is just a small portion of a program called Truck to Success. If you sign up here at the show, it's $150 off if you sign up for the in-person. This takes place October 22nd through the 24th. It's located in Green Valley, Missouri, which some may not know where that is. But we also have a Zoom. We also hold it through Zoom as well. So we have that option in case you're not able to come. It basically means you have to take a week off. And so I actually have some slips up here. So if you're interested, I can hand it to you. It has a QR code. You can go and you can look at the website. You can see more of what it has to offer. And you can also ask me questions right now. So are there any questions that you might have regarding any of this? Yes?
Profit loss thing.
Oh, we have a mic here.
Profit loss thing, is that on the OOIDA website?
Say that again. Profit and loss? Not exactly like that. You can get the spreadsheet, which will help you basically create it. But if you get the business plan, it will have that in the business plan, and you can just put in your own numbers.
Great, thank you. Thank you.
You're welcome.
No problem.
Yes, I have one up here. And our Executive Vice President, Louis Pugh, is our mic runner today, so he's got many hats on.
They get cheap help around here.
Yeah, no doubt. How often, we wrote a business plan when we started. How often should you update it and look at it?
I would update it once a quarter. But if that's too much, once a year. Nothing less than a year. At least once a year. Yes.
Sorry, can you go over the operational ratio again?
Go over the operational
just
ratio again?
real quick on the definition.
Yeah, absolutely. So you're looking at total operating expenses as well as your revenue. So let me just go back. I put too much stuff on the side. Okay. So you're taking your total operating expenses and you're dividing it by your revenue, and then you're multiplying it by 100 to make it a percentage, basically. And so you're wanting that to be at least 75% or under. That's showing that you are generating revenue while also controlling your costs at a safe amount. Now, a large carrier, because the reason why it's so much higher is they are trying to get as much market share as possible. They're buying new trucks, they're replacing new trucks. They're turning over drivers a lot. If you ever hear anyone say there's something like a driver shortage, don't believe them, that's a lie. And there's a lot of data that would show that that's a lie. But basically, they have such a high operating cost. And it works for them just because they have so many trucks. But for an owner-operator, you're going to have one truck, maybe a small fleet, and so you need that number to be quite a bit lower. Did you have specific questions about that, or does that kind of answer it? Okay. Yes.
I'm an owner-operator out of Appleton, Wisconsin. I just have a question. Do you have a way to accommodate for teaching me as I can go, because I do everything right now. I'm a one-person company right now. And can you, is there a way for you guys to accommodate for the help, like as it goes, not in the format of a single course?
Yes, absolutely. Well, another benefit, and I know you just signed up to be a OOIDA member. But one thing you can do, because you're a member, is call into the office. We have a compliance department. A lot of those guys have been in trucking for a number of years, and they can answer a lot of the questions that you might have about expanding your business, the permits and licensing that you need to have, even insurance, and all those different questions. So on top of the education material, OOIDA is a huge resource. And I know Louie's always saying it, a lot of people are saying, there's not a trucking question that you have that we cannot answer. There's going to be someone in that building that knows how to answer your question. So on top of the education, that's something as well. We also have some courses that you can find on YouTube, and of course all of those would be free, and they might talk about some of the things that you are looking for.
Okay. My toughest challenge is to build a system and just literally get used to it so well that week to week, month to month, quarter to quarter, year to year, I review, I update, and I analyze the information that is incoming information. And I do that, but I don't do that consistently, and it drives me crazy.
Well, and we have some help with that as well. In certain aspects of your business, we have a compliance connection where they can keep track of some of your things and even send you updates to let you know when things need to be looked at or updated as well.
Okay, sounds good. Thank you.
Oh, yeah.
On an earlier slide, you highlighted the differences between fuel costs for owner-operators versus larger fleets. And I think you said like cost per mile is like 20-cent difference. Can you speak to a little bit about like what creates that divide, and how do you get your costs lower as an owner-operator?
A lot of that is because of leverage. Obviously, if you are a large fleet and you can guarantee miles, and in fact, some of them have their own, they have their fuel even in the base, but they obviously can generate a lot more of savings because they can guarantee a certain number of gallons that they are going to use. And there are obviously vendors who are wanting to see that. And so something even like the OOIDA fuel card, and the more people use that, actually, the more benefits and savings that others can generate from it, because that gives us greater leverage. So basically, we're trying to pool a bunch of owner-operators together to give them the same kind of leverage that a large carrier would have.
Hey, I was just wondering, for your phone support, do you have multiple languages that you can communicate in for that phone support?
We do.
What do those languages include?
I know Spanish. Louis might be able to answer that question more than I can.
Right now we use a translation service that uses multiple ranges of languages. So if someone calls in, cannot speak English to one of our people, we connect with the translation service that does speak, and then we can move forward with business there. Some of the other things we are doing is like he talked about, some of this stuff is now being translated into Spanish by us, and we're hoping to work that out to other languages as well.
Yeah, thank you for the question. Any other questions that you might have? Okay.
Hey, I just want to say thank you. Hello? I just want to say thank you, everybody. Thanks, truckers, for what you do. We at OOIDA, we know how hard you work, and we appreciate everything you do for us. So thank you.
Absolutely. And if you have any questions, I'll be here for a little bit longer. So thank you.